We all know that water is the non-negotiable ingredient of life, but what happens with animals that live in places where this resource is extremely scarce? In the driest deserts on the planet, when the available water is minimal, survival depends on knowing how to manage every precious drop. So animals have developed different adaptations to not die of thirst, which are crazy. But which animal holds the record for going the longest without drinking water? At first, camels or dromedaries might come to mind. Their endurance is astonishing, and if the climate is temperate and they have access to green plants with some moisture, they can go months without drinking water directly. Even in the most suffocating desert, under temperatures of 50 degrees, they are capable of enduring several days performing intense physical activity without tasting a single drop. That said, a very common myth must be clarified. The humps of these animals are not filled with water. If we were to open one, we would not find a kind of large canteen, but a reserve of dense fat. In other words, they use them as energy for when food is scarce. It is not a liquid deposit. But even so, although these animals are amazing, they do not hold the record we were looking for. Let's meet a true survivor that has taken adaptation to lack of water to the limit. We are talking about an animal that can spend its entire life even without tasting a single drop of liquid water. Yes, not a single drop. Here is our protagonist today, the kangaroo rat. Well, actually, they are a group of rodents that inhabit North America. There are several species, and each one has different characteristics to be able to live in different corners of the desert and other arid zones. They have extremely long hind limbs that allow them to move by making large jumps on two legs in a movement that seems similar to that of kangaroos. This locomotion, so powerful and explosive, is their best life insurance to escape from any predator in tenths of a second. For example, this video that you are seeing was recorded at 500 frames per second, and we are playing it at 30 FPS so that you can appreciate it. And here, you see the real speed. And in this one, the same scene slower. The truth is that it is amazing to see how they manage to escape from the attack of snakes. For something they are also known as ninja rats. And here comes one of their most curious traits, their cheeks. Surely, you have seen on TV how many rodents use them to transport mountains of food to their burrows. But there is a vital difference. Kangaroo rats do not store food inside their mouths, but instead they have external pouches. They are like hair-lined pockets located on both sides of the snout, but with no connection to the inside of the mouth. This evolutionary adaptation is a masterpiece for two reasons. First, it prevents the seeds from absorbing their moisture by getting wet with saliva. And second, because if they had to open their mouths constantly to store seeds in the desert, they would also lose a very valuable water vapor from their interior. That is, it is a way to save as much water as possible and also continue storing food. Because, yes, these animals do not have the luxury of wasting water like we do, and let Merriam's kangaroo rat say it, one of the most studied species, because it has the ability to live literally without drinking liquid water throughout its life. And in part, this is possible because it uses metabolic water as an important source of hydration. You will see, metabolic water does not come from what we drink, nor from what foods contain. In other words, it does not come from outside. It is water that is literally manufactured inside the body of living beings as a result of the chemical reactions of our metabolism. To understand how it is created, we have to look at what happens inside our cells when we eat. There, our energy plants, that is, the mitochondria, burn, or rather oxidize nutrients to obtain energy in a process called cellular respiration. It may seem a bit confusing, but we are going to understand it very easily with this equation here. The oxidation of glucose. This is the chemical formula of the sugar glucose, and as you can see, the oxygen that we breathe is used to oxidize it completely. The result is the energy we need, although wastes are also produced. On one hand, carbon dioxide that we expel outside when we exhale, and on the other, new molecules of water that remain inside us. So although in principle, this water is nothing more than a byproduct of our reactions, for Merriam's kangaroo rat, it is a true treasure. Okay, and what do these animals eat to manufacture their own water? Well, their diet is very curious, although it depends on the season, and sometimes they eat insects and green leaves. There are periods in which they feed exclusively on dry seeds that are pure energy in the form of carbohydrates, that is, sugars. And here comes the striking part. If what we are looking for is water, fat is by far the best fuel. To give you an idea, for each gram of fat, the body generates more or less 1.10 grams of water. In contrast, 1 g of sugar only produces 0.6 gray. So why does the rat choose sugar? Well, for a matter of extreme saving, because fats need more oxygen to be oxidized, that is, they need more breaths of air or respirations. And why is this very important? Because in the end, the secret of the survival of these animals is very simple mathematics. They have to produce more water than they lose, and although we are not aware of it, losing water is very easy. So to balance those accounts, these rodents have developed extreme mechanisms of liquid conservation. The first has to do with their respiration, the nasal recovery of water. This system allows kangaroo rats to drastically reduce the moisture they lose when breathing. It is brilliant in its simplicity. Basically, their nose works like an air conditioner with water recycling. For the lungs of mammals to function correctly and not collapse, it is necessary that the air arrives humid. But of course, when the rat inhales desert air, it is extremely dry, so that air steals moisture from the walls of its nose to be able to reach the lungs hydrated. And when that water disappears, the nose becomes very, very cold. And here comes the magic. When the rat exhales, the air that comes out of its lungs is hot and loaded with vapor. But to exit to the outside, it has to pass by force through that tunnel that has just become cold. When that hot air collides with the cold walls of the nose, the vapor condenses and turns into droplets of water. That is, the water stays stuck in its nose instead of flying out into the desert. It is exactly the same as when you breathe onto a cold mirror. It fogs up because the vapor becomes liquid. So thanks to this trick, the rat recovers more than 2/3 of the water it would lose simply by breathing. Other animals lose that moisture when breathing, but it is an acceptable expense because we can replace it by drinking. But in the desert and without a single drop in sight, this system is the difference between life and death. Without it, the rat would lose too much water breathing and would be doomed to fatal dehydration. Now, we are going to move on to its most crucial adaptation, which is also the simplest. You do not have to be a genius to imagine it. The strategy of avoidance. It is not that they are fragile animals in the face of heat, but kangaroo rats hide from the lethal temperatures of the surface by taking refuge in their burrows. In fact, they avoid direct sunlight by remaining underground 80% of their life, where they enjoy a much more stable microclimate. And this drastically reduces the loss of water they would suffer if they were exposed to the scorching desert air. So while their body recycles every drop internally, their behavior prevents the sun from stealing it from the outside. Another extreme adaptation, which is also impressive, occurs in their kidneys. They have very specialized changes in their anatomy that make them extraordinarily efficient, so much so that they produce the most concentrated urine known among all mammals. Thus, the rat can expel waste from its body, losing a ridiculously low amount of liquid. And what happens with their solid excrement? Well, exactly the same. Their digestive system squeezes every drop to the end, making the feces very dry. To give you an idea, it has been calculated that after eating the same amount of food, a kangaroo rat loses 5 times less water through its feces than a common rat. As you have seen, our planet hides biological ingenuity that seems taken from science fiction. The kangaroo rat is the perfect example that, with the right evolution, it is possible to thrive even where life seems impossible. Do you know any other animal with an adaptation that has blown your mind, or any other extreme survivor that you want us to talk about? We read you in the comments. And that is all. A hug to everyone, and see you in the next video.